Hello and welcome back to Stop Doing That, Preston Tucker Part 2. I am Andrea, pronouns she and her. I am still in control of this story, and fearful of what is to come is
John.
Yes, I am. I am
John.
the author of the What Happened Here series, a series about terrible things throughout history. And I'm here with my friend Andrea, who will be telling me about quite a man indeed, Preston Tucker. Learned quite about him in the first part.
So, last time we told you about the pre and wartime actions of Preston Tucker, his ventures into racing and defense contracting. Now, let us accelerate rapidly in a 5-ton armored car back to our story. As the war drew to a close, relationships between Tucker and Andrew Higgins, the Navy's gunboat manufacturer, would sour and he would return to Detroit with the desire for his own car brand. And this is where everything would go wrong.
As it usually does.
Following a series of Following a series of magazine articles in which Tucker would begin to sort of lay out his desires for an automobile brand in his usual sort of showman style. Um, he would lay out what the exact kind of car he intended to build. Um, One of the things I should note before we go any further, and why this was actually drawing so much attention, I forgot to put it in the notes, but I recall it. Um, if, as we all know, one of the major features of World War II was sort of mass rationing for basically every power involved. Rationing isn't new for a war, but the degree to which we could centralize and sort of control rationing across major industries was new. And part of this was with all of the American automobile brands ceasing production of new vehicles. They would turn all of that production over to war material, and no new models of vehicle would be brought to the American public during the war. So
Just as a little aside here, this also led to the stoppage of pretty much all motorsports in the late 1940s, because again, like she's saying, everything had to go to the war. So
exactly.
would that have been some of the reason why Preston might have moved away from racing?
No, that was very much like the failure between like him and Harry Miller and their failures at the 1935 Daytona 500.
Uh,
Um, though keep that in mind. Indianapolis will be back.
all right, okay.
In factually, it will be back with a vengeance
Oh,
for Mr. Tucker.
oh, fantastic. All right.
Um, So when Preston Tucker came to the media and he said, "I have this vision for a new car, the car for a new and victorious America," yeah, people ate it up. So what exactly did Mr. Tucker? What was his design? What was his plan? Well, it was so what he had named as the Tucker 48, the Tucker Model 1948, and which would soon carry the moniker of the Tucker Torpedo. Um, it was a pretty radical departure from what the average American expected for a car. It was a rear engine, rear wheel drive sedan. That part kind of out of the ordinary. You didn't see a lot of rear engine vehicles during the war,
Keep that in
or
mind
well,
for
before
a.
the war.
Just wanted to say, keep that in mind for a future episode of the podcast.
Oh, oh boy.
Yeah.
Um, but it's in the little features where his car would really sort of rock the boat. it would have an automatic transmission, independent suspension, disc brakes,
Huh.
all three features that we consider to be like cornerstones of the average automobile these days were brand new.
Really?
And yeah, these things were, unless you were buying a very high end vehicle, you were not going to get something like independent suspension.
Huh.
Um, yeah, disc brakes were brand new. Automatic transmissions. Here's me leaning on the fact that I am very much more of a war nerd. You see some of this automat the dealings with like automatic transmissions coming first for like vehicles. I'm looking at you, Porsche,
Yeah.
Ferdinand Porsche,
Yeah.
and your
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and that they were known for poor mechanical reliability, frequently catching on fire, and all in all, just not being very good.
Also, I'm looking at the picture of the Tucker torpedo right now. Uh, that's supposed to be a
Yeah,
sedan?
it
Because
is.
to me,
Notably, the one I've included here in the notes is just a promotional picture. It's concept
yeah, it's a concept car, I guess. Concept cars are famous for going to production.
art. In as they would as well um, add a couple of other safety features, some of which we still don't see today. Um, Things like a padded dashboard. A lot of vehicles, it's still a sharp plastic edge
Yeah,
because it has to look stylish and not actually protect people in the event of a collision.
I mean, in fairness, though, if you do crash a car with a plastic dashboard, at the very least, your death will be very quick.
This is true, yes.
You won't suffer.
One of the features we don't see on modern automobiles, and I will say probably for good reason, is the pop out windshield. We've since learned that it is in fact far safer to stay within the confines of the automobile to keep all of your arms and legs inside the attraction at all times. Um, and so we don't let the large piece of glass go hurtling around. But notably, this was also before we started using modern auto glass. So we there is a good reason as to why the what was effectively a large pane of just flat glass was allowed to separate itself from the vehicle.
I'm guessing this is the kind of glass that just shatters into a billion pieces, whereas modern auto glass isn't it like supposed to shatter in just like a handful of pieces or something like that?
This it's actually more the sort of the opposites. This is the sort of thing that shatters into large jagged chunks and goes flying around.
All right.
Whereas modern auto glass reduces to like small size, like pebble sized pieces that while they'll go flying around, they're not going to you're not going to get stabbed with them.
I was kind of under the impression. I assumed the large jagged pieces were the safer option. I mean, I guess it makes sense that they wouldn't be because then you effectively just
Look,
have a bunch of knives.
I'm going to rely on the fact that I am the most recent recipient of an automobile crash and say I
Yeah,
prefer the small
yeah, that
pieces.
is true. I do remember that. Yeah.
Um, So one of the other things that we still also really don't see too much these days was the engine. Tucker promised a powerful engine, and he would be using a horizontally opposed design. Um, it's kind of hard to explain in an audio format, but basically instead of the standard V-type engine where two rows of pistons are powering into the central into the central shaft, they sit at like a flat 180 degrees, opposing each other.
That's the
Um,
sort of engine like the Porsche 911 has.
yeah,
It's like a flat
um,
cylinders. Yeah.
yeah. This is it's Tucker would desire a six-cylinder engine, which is fairly similar to like the modern boxer styles, which have been used. I know that like Subaru used to use them a lot because they're actually fairly small
That
if you build them
yeah,
right.
that is the flat six is the engine that Porsche uses for a lot of their sport have used for like pretty much all of their sports cars. It's the and it is a fantastic engine. Like
Yeah, it is surprisingly powerful for its size.
it also makes a very very nice noise, which is very important to car nerds like me. The Porsche 911 is probably the best sounding car maybe in all of history.
And it's all of this interest, all of these distinct features that would have the a lot of Americans desiring these these Tucker 48s. They would be going they Tucker actually received a deluge of letters from the American public asking when and where they could purchase this car.
Honestly,
Now, I would like you to go ahead.
I kind of want one. It's I'm liking a
Well,
lot of this.
unfortunately for you, there's about 56 of them left,
Oh
and
man.
those are the only 56 that were ever built.
To be honest, I'm mildly surprised that he even built one.
Um, so it's all this interest brought in by the the automotive public that might draw some might raise some flags, might draw some parallels between Mr. Tucker and another uh, automotive man who designed a uniquely shaped vehicle with proposed unique safety features.
Yes, certainly I will say having no crumple zones is very unique. That is definitely no one else does that.
But with this influx of interest from the public and this desire to bring this car to the market, Tucker would actually be able to bring around himself um, a large number of automotive executives as well. He would be able to staff an entire boardroom with like men from like Ford and Chrysler who who had the experience to run an auto brand, while Tucker could be that sort of that front man, that guy who's going on stage and hucking a metal sphere at the side of a car. But the first major hurdle for this or for any new product is manufacturing. Um, Luckily for Tucker, there was a large factory in Chicago that was now completely unused. The war was over. They didn't need a large plant for the production of, say, aircraft engines, which is exactly what he found. Uh, Constructed during the war and used by the Dodge Corporation, there was a massive plant that was used for the construction of B-29 engines. Uh, the actual factory use had ceased in 1945. This is now 1946, and so it had laid unused for several months. Tucker, who had wanted to move his brand out of Detroit, he didn't want to be associated with the Motor City. He's a new man, a new brand, and they're gonna set up shop in a new city. Um, and Tucker would move to acquire this plant. He would approach the War Assets Administration, which was the U.S. government body that was tasked with finding a use for just about everything that had been purchased or built during the war. A lot of these, these new civilian plants, these, things like, large warehouses, staging grounds, or say a bomber engine factory. And with Tucker seeking approval to use it, they were all but willing to just give it away. But you know these sorts of things weren't built on the cheap. Um, and Tucker had one problem: cash, or well, the lack thereof. Preston Tucker was never a terribly wealthy man. He had a large family. I think it's some like 9 children.
Oh man.
Uh, yeah, which also necessitated a large house and a lot of expenses. Um, he'd also spent he and Higgins during their time in Louisiana had spent very lavishly, especially for wartime, on like the workers at the plant, at the gunboat plant. So he didn't exactly have a lot of spare cash laying. Um, his day-to-day general expenses were cared for by the profits of a side business that he'd set up before the war, machine and tool shop in the city of Ypsilanti, Michigan, creatively named Ypsilanti Machine and Tool.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, Ypsilanti, Michigan is actually they have like a major automotive museum there nowadays, which is one of the cool things.
Yeah.
So if I ever take a vacation, hopefully, I might try and make the trip out there to see it.
Not a bad idea, definitely.
But all this moving around, all this heavy spending left Tucker with about $27,000 to his name, which is certainly a lot more money than $27,000 today.
Certainly a lot more money
But
than
it
we
wasn't.
have.
Yeah. Um, but that's not nearly enough to buy a massive machine plant that I believe is estimated at like 6 million square feet.
Yeah, but imagine that costs at least $28,000.
But the War Assets Administration was sitting on this plant. They didn't really know what to do with it. So they were like, all right, man, you know what? You're a man with a dream. That is the American way. You give us a money order for $25,000 and we'll start talking lease terms. So that's what Tucker did. He sent them a Western Union money order for $25,000. And on its way to Washington, it would mysteriously disappear.
Really? Is that? I mean, you said
It would.
you said to send the money order. It didn't say anything about you actually receiving it.
So it would be later on in 1947, I believe. Um, a company called Lustron, which manufactured prefab housing, would try to secure the same plant for their own uses. And this is one of the things that they would use to sort of cry foul over the entire Tucker deal. Um, and confusingly, at the time of the initial incident, the WAA would claim that this was actually fortunate for Tucker, that his money order had simply vanished. Um, I,
John.
I don't know if you've ever issued a Western Union money order.
I have not.
I have. Um, they are paid for up front.
Hmm.
If you lose that money order, it's fucking gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine. Ugh, boy.
But regardless of the WAA never actually receiving their $25,000 as sort of a down payment on everything, they would allow Tucker to just go ahead on the lease. They said, "Yeah, sure. You know what? You made a good effort of it. You can have the plant. Just have us, have part of the money you owe us by by a certain date, and that date um, would be July 3rd." Um, they put together a letter of intent to lease, which is basically just a big document that lays out all the terms for like what Tucker needed to do. And by that time, by July 3rd, he would have to come up with $150,000. And after that, there would be an October deadline for another $675,000.
Okay.
The executives around Tucker would also again pull a weird maneuver. They would actually stand against Tucker making an initial stock offering, um, and allowing the average person to buy into the Tucker Corporation from an early standpoint. They were worried, about the company's limited finances and limited assets and what the SEC would have to say about it. But with the strong interest in the company, I am willing to say that this is actually something that directly hindered the Tucker Corporation's ability to raise capital. Um, they could have brought the mountain of letters of support to Washington to say we are a company that has major support. There was also another government agency that was handing out loans to American companies that had either survived the war or started up in the wake of the war, to help jumpstart the economy. And the point was raised that Tucker could get like several $1 million from the government for his new company this way. They would not take this offer, or they would not approach that agency about a loan. But they would come up with a new idea from all of the support that they'd seen from the public, and especially from automotive dealers who, wisely cottoned on that they were like, oh, the public wants these cars, well, then we better be able to sell them. They would do something unconventional. For $50 a piece, dealers could reserve stock in new cars. So, you put $50 down, and the Tucker Corporation sends you a Tucker 48 to sell.
Uh,
This would actually raise a fair amount of capital for the fledgling company, but it really wasn't enough.
so like
Um,
they for $50 they just sent you a car and you had to go and sell it for them. Am I getting that right?
uh, think of it, think of it more like pre-ordering a video game. You put some money down now, and when the time comes, uh, once they brought this car into the market, you get sent one of them, and then it's there for your lot to sell.
Okay. All right.
Uh,
Yeah. Okay. I think I understand.
now hold on to this confusion. It will come back.
Great. Fantastic.
The so like as I said, this gamble with car dealers would raise a fair amount of capital for the company, but not nearly enough.
Okay.
Um, and this is the point at which the WAA gives yet more baffling instructions. Um, the Tucker wrote to the War Assets Administration saying, "Look, I don't have the money." And under normal circumstances, were it you, I, or the Dodge Corporation, we would be told, all right, that's it, pack your stuff, get out of the plant. This is not what they told Preston Tucker.
Of course, yeah.
The agent at the WAA told him, write us a check for $150,000. And then, in the envelope with that check, enclose a note that says that this check is to be held and not cashed until such a time as the Tucker Corporation has $150,000.
Oh, God.
No deadlines stipulated, just when you have the money.
It's just like.
That check would go from the office of the agent who was overseeing the Tucker Corporation's lease of the Chicago plant to another office who would not see the note to hold the check and would try to cash it.
Yeah.
At which point the check bounced, and the War Assets Administration, who had not been told of this arrangement, were like, "Hey, dude, where's our freaking money?"
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Tucker would be like, this is the point at which Tucker would try some shenanigans.
Oh, no.
Tucker would say that he, the Tucker Corporation, and the War Assets Administration needed to revisit the terms of the lease. Why did they need to revisit the terms of the lease? Well, the War Assets Administration had screwed up at least one little part of the process. Because in the contract, it said that before the Chicago plant could be sold or leased, the government had to do an inventory of everything on the property. And so far, that had not been done. So, technically speaking, Tucker was not leasing the plant yet.
Oh. Oh, God.
The War Assets Administration would finally get its ass in gear, conduct the inventory, and then it would be noted that this had actually screwed up the timeline of lease payments. And the War Assets Administration looked at the Tucker Corporation and said, you know what? Fine. Just have $15 million in the bank or in stock assets by March 1st, 1947. The bad check for $150,000 would be forgiven. And by this point, the WAA had actually found the money order. It had just been bouncing around the WAA offices in D.C. And that $25,000 would also be mailed back to Tucker.
God. You would think these guys are like Trump administration appointees without how badly they're cocking this all up.
Well, I mean, let's be fair. They had just come off the single largest war in the known universe, and most of the actually important people were drafted to go shoot Nazis in the face. So
yeah, that is true. A lot of the people they could have been good at this sort of thing were horribly killed in Europe and Japan.
or did shoot Nazis in the face. We
Yeah,
cannot overlook the fact that some of them did something good.
Yeah, they did do a very good thing. They died for a very noble cause.
And so now it seemed like, okay, the trouble with the War Assets Administration is over. We can relax a little bit. Right? Right?
Right. Yeah,
Wrong.
sure.
Remember how I said that that way that Tucker had done that automobile sort of reservation with dealers
Yeah.
was kind of weird.
Yeah.
Well, the SEC thought so too.
Yeah, I imagine they probably did.
The Securities and Exchange Commission determined that putting down money for the promise of a car in the future constituted a financial security, a security that has to be registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Yeah, I wonder what they do with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Uh,
Surely it couldn't be the regulation of securities and the exchanging therein.
yeah, I don't know what else. I don't know what they would do. I mean, it can't be that.
So at this point, the, the SEC was like, all right, look, we get it. You're a small company. You're trying to raise capital. We're not going to levy any penalties about this, but you're going to have to rework this deal. The Tucker would reduce the fee amount to just $20, um, but they would attach to this a clause stating that the Tucker Corporation could use the funds in any way they so desired, and that effectively, if no car ever came to the market, there was nothing the dealerships could do about it. Admittedly, $20 now and $20 back then isn't nearly, it's more than $20 today, but it really isn't, a massive amount when you're going to be selling this car for, like a couple thousand.
Yeah.
Um, this would also be the point at which Lustron, that prefab housing company, would attempt to lobby the government into giving them the plant instead. Um, and they would point out like, hey, the Tucker Corporation really doesn't have the capital to be leasing this plant. They bounced a bad check. They've done this weird stuff with dealerships. Um, and this entire series of events would lead Lustron to basically like the near brink of actually getting the plant, but in sort of a twist, the federal government, the like actual like legislators and things like that would side with the Tucker Corporation, um, declaring that new automobiles were greater in importance than prefabricated housing.
Okay. Not 100. I mean, I guess back in the 1940s, I could see
Yeah,
how
I mean when
cars
the
were of greater
Sears company,
importance.
yeah, when the Sears company, actively sells a prefabricated housing kit, a new company trying to do the same thing just really isn't a big deal.
Yeah.
Um, but this is the point at which Tucker would face another new setback. Um, in doing all of this, they kind of neglected the whole building a car thing. Um, and if they wanted to raise 15 million before, the end of like Q1, 1947, they needed stock assets and they needed them quickly.
Yeah, they need to. They're a
But
car company has to actually, make cars.
yeah, um, and this meant that they would need to go back to the Securities and Exchange Commission with a car to show that they could build cars.
Yeah.
Um, so with some of that um, with some of that money, they would set about building their first prototype. Um, Normally, in the car manufacturing process, a company will have a clay model of the vehicle and then a metal model of the vehicle. The clay model is there to help them, get down the shape and then start calibrating in their machinery. Whereas, that full metal prototype is the one that um, is, shown to the public. That's their concept car.
Yeah.
Um,
And then they say,
Tucker would do this backwards.
"Oh, really?"
Yes, the first Tucker prototype would be built on the junkyarded chassis of an Oldsmobile, um, and with about 60 days to do it, um, the few engineers that the Tucker Corporation actually had would produce the Tin Goose. Um, though my personal position is it is very much more of a swan, at least in the looks department, though perhaps not by temperament.
I can see what you mean. I think it,
Yeah, she's a
it
beauty.
is a nice looking car.
That
I
is
do
that
like
is
it.
the actual. That is production number quadruple zero. That is the Tin Goose.
Huh. Yeah.
Yeah, it still lives today in a sort of improbable story. I marked it here in the notes. You would expect it from something like, like the History Channel show American Pickers. The this improbable, one of a kind production prototype car was just behind a barn in rural Pennsylvania.
That tends to be how it works with American pickers. They just go in there into a barn and totally find real things that they actually did find in there and did not just plant in there before the filming of the show.
Yeah, except in this case, it was the real deal.
Yeah.
It was quadruple zero, alongside parts of Tucker 1018, which now exists. It is one of the few that does not exist as a whole vehicle.
Yeah.
Believe me, the Tucker enthusiasts have been exceedingly thorough. They know where all of them are, except for like one.
Oh, God. Now that is how you're supposed to spend your days, just trying to find Tuckers.
Seriously, this is what we mean when we say that men need hobbies.
Indeed.
Um, Tucker would take this new car out to where else but the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indy 500. And she was a showstopper. Now, speaking of stopping shows, we will take a quick diversion into the conversation corner.
Absolutely, we will. So, I mentioned in the Mars episode how there's been several attempts throughout history, mainly by the Soviets, to put nuclear reactors in space and use them to propel spacecraft. Well, a few days ago, NASA unveiled its, quoting here, initiatives to achieve America's national space policy.
Oh dear.
Because, Trump being who he is, he wants a moon base. Because
It's gonna be huge.
he wants a moon base.
They're calling it the Trump class.
And part of the plan to get that, as well as also to get back to the moon just in general, is that what we find what it actually said here. They're planning to build in the next few years something called the Space Reactor 1 Freedom, where, quote, we are finally putting nuclear propulsion on a trajectory out of the laboratory and into deep space. Stop doing that. Stop putting.
I joked about it before. We will have an episode on Starfish Prime. The time we detonated a nuke in space.
Stop.
I know that they're different. But
we don't
stop putting nukes in space.
We don't need space Chernobyl. Like I mentioned in the
Okay, I'm going to be honest. If there's one place to have Chernobyl,
I guess space is better.
It is the place where we can also fling it into the sun.
That is true, but also, what if it, comes crashing back down to Earth and then spreads?
It'll be Australia's problem.
Oh yeah, just let the Australians deal with it.
Just like Skylab was Australia's problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And so they're planning to also launch this thing called Dragonfly, which will be a nuclear-powered octocopter. It will arrive. It will leave in 2028 and arrive on at Saturn's moon Titan in 2034. So
Oh, well, that's one to look forward to then.
yeah, they're planning.
I mean, I'm presuming that it's when they say, um, like nuclear powered, what they mean is that it's going to use RTGs. That's radioisotope thermoelectric generator.
It did say like
That
nuclear
makes
electric power. So yeah, that sounds about right.
yeah, which is RTGs are much safer than like full nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
Um, they're not wholly safe. There is at least one incident that I can think of off the top of my head, um, where we will talk about them being very unsafe and certain governments being like, stop going near them.
Yeah, and we should stress, listeners, I'm not against nuclear energy at all. I think nuclear energy is fantastic.
Neither am I. I think that we should be building more nuclear power plants,
It,
frankly.
absolutely.
But we should be building them here on Earth.
Yeah, we should do them here on Earth where there are human beings that can attend to them and control them, and not, putting them out into space where they could potentially crash down to Earth and kill thousands of people.
And or like two Australians.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I do have, speaking of the United States, I have one other story for us in our news segment. Um, we're doing 9/12, baby.
Are
There
are
is
we really?
there is an intention to build the Twin Towers again
Why?
because it's about time.
Okay, I will admit the Twin Towers were very cool looking. So I can,
No, they weren't. They were giant. They were giant rectangles. They were wind
yeah,
sails.
but I mean, they were neat. Two big towers. It's like, oh, they're exactly the same, basically, kind of. They were neat. I can see the vision definitely. Although I do
Well,
wonder.
it's notable. I should note, here in this article from Futurism, they note that Raphael Chrysler, uh, not related to the Chrysler automotive brand, one is spelled with an E. The architect of this very stupid plan is spelled with an A. Um, is not from America, and like the two of us, was a toddler when uh, the powers of Islam, brought the American hubris to the ground.
Yeah.
Um, this idea to build a second set of twin towers is even stupider. They want to make them data centers.
Ugh.
They want to have a tech lab in them, and the ever present of a chance of them attempting 9/11 2. Oh no, more 9/11. It will have its own air defense system.
I will also say.
It will have missiles.
I will also say, listeners. Andrea, I posted about this in our private server. They're building 7 data centers down here.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, there was a
Ugh.
big protest tonight. Thankfully, a lot of people
That's
turned out.
frankly impressive.
Yeah, a lot of people turned out.
Given the redacted location.
Yeah,
Actually, people actually turning out to protest is impressive.
yeah. They did send cops, though, several cops there, presumably to intimidate them.
Eh, the cops of our noted locality are all they're all crooked.
Yeah, they're all the insane fascist freaks, just like most cops, if not all of them.
The other note, these new twin towers would carry not just surface to air missile launchers,
Oh
but
God!
they want to include a multi-megawatt laser defense system like it's Ace fucking Combat.
See a plane just coming in there, just hit it with just cut it in half with the laser, and it'll just fall.
I'm not even joking when I say Ace Combat. Literally, a giant tower that shoots lasers has been a boss in an Ace Combat game.
That sounds about right for Ace Combat. Just it just that way when you shoot the plane down, it won't kill people in the building. It'll just kill people on the ground.
All right. Now that we have had our little news break, let's see what happens if we plow this story into the infield of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway at 90 miles an
Fantastic.
hour. With a prototype of his vehicle in hand, Tucker would approach the SEC so that the corporation um, could actually begin offering stock. The SEC would raise various complaints about changes between like the previously submitted documents, especially like the old descriptions of the vehicle and the new descriptions of the vehicle. Um, they there had been some minor changes. You know, new some of those revolutionary safety features that Tucker wanted, they just weren't gonna fly on the new vehicles.
Hmm.
If they actually wanted to make it into production, so they were axed. Um, the SEC would also raise the issue that Tucker hadn't used any of his own money in the enterprise, despite the fact that this entire process so far had been funded in part or in whole by profits from Ypsilanti Machine and Tool.
Really?
Yeah. So eventually, the SEC relented, and the stock sale could go ahead. Um, the Tin Goose, their prototype, had been taken from sort of Chicago to LA and back again as a way to continue sort of keeping the interest alive. And it would be in September of 1947, only a couple months past the March 1st deadline, that with $15 million in hand and in stock assets, Tucker would approach the WAA, the War Assets Administration, again and say, "We're ready to lease the plant." A check would be cut, and the Tucker Corporation could officially begin building vehicles.
Finally.
So now, Shirley, don't call me Shirley. My name is Andrea. Everything would go right, right?
I'm sure, yeah. I'm sure, definitely.
Well, I mentioned it before, but a lot of those top of the line things that Tucker wanted, those weren't gonna fly beyond the Tin Goose.
Oh.
Um, that fancy sort of hydraulic automatic transmission, that was not production ready.
Oh.
And those big, flat six engines that Tucker wanted to build, they weren't gonna cut either. Luckily, his engineers had made space in the engine bay of the Tucker 48 to actually put a smaller engine. But a lot of the sort of the smaller, fancier things that the real like buyers wouldn't notice,
Yeah.
those would go.
Yeah.
This also notably made it a lot easier for auto mechanics if they would ever have to service a Tucker 48 to be able to actually do.
Yeah.
And March 9th of 1948, the first Tucker 48, number 1001, would appear before a group of assembled stockholders under its own power.
Woohoo, they kind of did it. They made an car.
Yep. And this is where the company's collapse begins.
Really?
Yep. The um, the production was slow, and you know, they were struggling to get these vehicles sent out to customers who had bought them. And in the 2 months preceding this, uh, Tucker had approached the War Assets Administration about using a blast furnace that was on the factory site, but which had not been part of that initial deal for the factory. Um, it would be incredibly useful to the Tucker Corporation if they could bring more of their manufacturing on site, especially steel handling for things like chassis, for which one would need a blast furnace. And the War Assets Administration, May 28th of 1948, would say no, you
Finally.
cannot use.
Finally, they actually told him no. Just flatly
Well,
no.
they would say we're not giving you the right to use that machinery. And it's on that same day that the SEC would come back.
Oh.
And it would really be the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, who would tell him that it was time to stop.
Yep. It,
He had received a letter that he, Preston Tucker, and the Tucker Corporation were under investigation. Tucker would then go to D.C. and he would try, sort of the usual methods of amending, like stock offerings to meet the demands of the SEC. These are the normal mechanisms that any other major corporation would have gone through, and the SEC said no. For whatever reason, between the time that he had initially started offering stock in the Tucker Corporation and, you know, May or June of 1948, they they had developed a chip on their shoulder for whatever reason.
yeah. Wonder
Um,
why.
and it would be on June 3rd that six agents of the SEC would come into the Tucker Corporation offices at the plant in Chicago to seize books and financial records. The SEC would not explain what they suspected the Tucker Corporation of. They simply noted that it was irregularities. Um, Preston Tucker would go to the media, who had, frequently assisted him in putting out the better side of him, and noting, claiming that the government was engaging in a fishing expedition. They were doing this investigation trying to uncover wrongdoing instead of starting from an actual criminal charge. Um, and it very much seems like uh, criminal action was sort of the predetermined conclusion, as a sort of muckraker news broadcaster named Drew Pearson would go onto his show. Notably, he had close ties to like the federal government and was frequently sort of working to smear their enemies, who were also his enemies.
Hmm.
Um, and he went on his show and claimed that this whole investigation would blow Tucker higher than a kite.
I mean, I suppose Tucker's way of dealing with this is a little bit better than what Sam Bankman-Fried did when he was under investigation by the SEC, where his whole thing was to go to the media and just say, "Yeah, I'm just really stupid. That's all that happened. I'm just really dumb."
And it's this action by Drew Pearson and a few other and a bunch of notable papers that would crash the Tucker Corporation's overall valuation. Um, they would lose $10 million in stock. That is $134 million in today's money.
I feel like obviously back then that's probably enormous. Today though, I feel like that doesn't sound.
It
It
doesn't.
doesn't sound
I
as
mean,
bad.
in our modern day of corporations that make 134 million dollars in an hour.
It
Um,
doesn't sound
I
as
mean, yeah,
bad.
it's not,
Like you
but
hear something like that, like oh, Apple lost $800 billion last year, and it's like doesn't even affect them
yeah, the
whatsoever.
ghost of Steve Jobs sneezed and they lost $1 billion, and they're still gonna be open.
Yeah,
But I mean, put it in the context of a smaller company
yeah,
that has maybe only a few $1 million to its name, and all of the sudden they've lost. What in today's money is 134 million.
yeah. Back in those for the situation that they're in, that's like a game ender.
Yeah. Um. So the SEC would also use this as a chance to begin interrogating Tucker investors and trying to squeeze information, specifically anti-Tucker information, out of
Hmm.
them.
Okay.
Their real target in this wasn't the Tucker Corporation, but Preston Tucker himself. Um, this the other big thing about this is that now that they were down $10 million in afternoon, credit lenders wouldn't loan, and automobile parts are commonly bought on credit. So with the Tucker Corporation being forced to pay out in what little cash they had, they were already struggling.
Hmm.
As I mentioned, uh, you know, more bad news came. As I mentioned, the in-house developed transmission, um, it worked, but it wasn't production viable. Notably because you could not go from drive into reverse with the engine still on. You had to shift it down, stop the engine, shift into reverse, and then restart the engine.
Oh my god.
This, I mean, as anyone who has driven a car would know, this is suboptimal.
Yeah, that's
You
not.
do not want that.
Yeah, it's not great.
And this meant that, supposing that they could get it done, and supposing that, this automatic transmission would be viable, only the first few production Tucker 48s would have to be a manual. This is the point at which Tucker would start to do damage control. Um, and that wasn't something that should have been his work. Um, this is really the point at which I say he most closely resembles Elon Musk. Their shared ego is sort of something that's, well, it's going to come through. I'll read you a selection here from
It it's ego and also just posting through your problems, basically.
exactly. I'll read a section here from Steve Lehto's Preston Tucker and his battle to build the car of tomorrow. This is Tucker's own words. Gentlemen, as you know, we are building a completely new motor car, the rear-engine Tucker. Being newcomers in the field, we have had to start from scratch and work harder and faster than most of you. For example, Instead of the 20 months you usually take to produce a new model of conventional design, my engineers have taken less than 10 to perfect a car which I firmly believe opens a new era in motoring. Those were his words in an open letter to the other auto manufacturers.
Yeah,
The words of, you guys are being mean to me because I'm trying to do it so much better than you.
yeah, that sounds very Musk core, I must say.
But, you know, whining at the other auto manufacturers wasn't going to help. And the the damage had really been done even before the SEC had released a single official word on their report. The Tucker plant in Chicago would go into an idle state, and a majority of the workforce would either be fully laid off or placed into a similar sort of idle and standby state. Um, when two Tucker dealers and an investor brought a lawsuit against the corporation, the conspiracy theories would begin to fly,
Oh, fantastic.
including but not limited to that Tucker was building a lavish home in Bogota, Colombia, a place
Huh?
that, despite all of his traveling, he had never been to.
Really? Really? Yeah, just, my god.
Um, Now, despite all of this, Tucker was down, but still not out. Following a parade through Chicago by the Tucker employees, Preston and what few men he had left would go on manually assembling vehicles at the plant.
Hmm.
They had managed to secure a fair supply of those various parts that had been bought on credit before the stock collapse, and they would just keep building as they could. Um, this is the point at which, unlike Musk's rolling death trap, we see that the Tucker 48 um, was really far more of an impressive vehicle than Tucker was letting on. Um, they had been secretly testing the vehicle at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Um, and on September 24th, Tucker's head of testing, a man named Eddie Offutt, was behind the wheel of Tucker number 1027. Um, he had just been pushing the vehicle as hard as he could, as long as he could, and following a full night of driving near its top speed of 90 miles an hour, the engine would stall and Offutt would lose control.
Ooh.
The the Tucker struck the grass, the infield grass at Indianapolis, slid sideways, rolled 3 times, and then landed on its wheels. Following a dust off for both Offutt and 1027, the engine was restarted, and under her own power, 1027 rolled off the infield.
I am stunned that Offutt even survived that, because in those days, the way racing worked in those days is pretty simple. If you crashed, you simply died.
Well, remember, this was not during a race. They just had the track to themselves.
Yeah, but he's
Um,
pushing the car, 90 miles per hour. He's going as hard as he can. Yeah, in those days, you crash your car at high speed. You were the best you can hope for is being grievously injured.
and because of all of the safety features that Tucker had put into the vehicle, Offutt walked out of it alive.
It's like a Volvo.
And were it not for the pop out windshield, which had gone flying during the crash, they likely would have driven 1027 back to Chicago under its own power in convoy with a number of other Tucker 48s.
Huh. How about that?
The actual cause of the crash had been it hadn't even been off its own work that had caused the crash. It had actually been the mechanics who had grabbed a can of aviation gas that they just happened to have with them during a 4 a.m. fueling stop. So the engine not being rated to handle avgas just coughed out and died.
Yeah.
We happen to know that this story is actually true because this story would be presented in court as part of the SEC's handlings and filings against the Tucker Corporation. This is a story that would be used to say, look, we actually had a car, and not only was it a car, it was a good one.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, despite all of this, it would not be long before Tucker's number 1045 and 1046 would come off the assembly line. The last Tuckers, only a few months distant from the first. The shutdown of production would only bring more troubles, as dealers who had been expecting cars, especially from that original deal, that $50 buy-in, now started entering involuntary bankruptcy because they didn't have cars to sell. The plaintiffs would make some half-true claims, among them that the Tin Goose, that prototype Tucker, was a rebuilt 1942 Oldsmobile. They would claim that it was entirely an Oldsmobile, but Tucker had the proof to say, like, yeah, look, we used an Oldsmobile chassis, but beyond that, it's our own design.
Yeah.
The investors were also wrong to say that the Tin Goose could not move under its own power, when in fact could. Where the investors were far more correct was that powerhouse opposed piston engine that Tucker had touted was nowhere near production. And yeah, they were right there. That engine was never coming.
Yeah.
During the bankruptcy, there would be some challenges, and there would be some moves to get other people to buy into the Tucker company, namely Howard Hughes, who I'm sure will get his own episode.
Oh, Howard Hughes. The original Elon Musk in many ways.
Yeah, we're gonna have fun with the Howard Hughes episode.
Yes, we are.
Hughes would publicly deny interest. One of the rare things he would actually do, in this day.
Yeah.
In this part of his life. But what is more confirmed, but there was actually interest from the Checker Cab Corporation, the people who manufacture taxis.
Huh. Okay. That's a pick.
Yeah. They sent engineers around to have a look at it, but really nothing would come from this. The Tucker Corporation would ebb and flow and really just keep flowing. In 1948, the SEC finally concluded their investigation with a 561-page report. What would they actually allege? They would position that Preston Tucker had committed fraud. Their own words here. In the wake of an extensive newspaper advertising program, which gave widespread publicity to the Tucker Corporation's claim that, under the guidance of Preston Tucker, described as a recognized automotive inventor and designing genius, the company was about to mass produce a revolutionary but completely tested and proved new passenger car. That was their claim. That is what they had to say about Preston Tucker's marketing. the SEC would also try to insinuate that much of the progress that Tucker had actually made um, had somehow been illegal. Um, that it had all been a sham, it had all been fraud. Um, they, but really, they just seemed to be mad that the SEC was not being taken seriously.
Yeah.
Um, they had tried, they had tried to put out there like, "Hey, we think the Tucker Corporation is a scam," and the people had bought in regardless.
Yeah.
So they were just kind of, they seemed to be mad that they hadn't been taken seriously, and above all, that the Tucker 48 wasn't a conventional car. Labeling it as an untested, unproven conglomeration of highly questionable engineering ideas.
Yeah, if there's one thing that the government does not like, it's being told it's kind of just like being treated like a joke. Definitely.
Yeah, this report, um, which accused Tucker of no true crime. They did not point to any actual like citation of the laws, like an exact law that was broken, um, would be used to prosecute Tucker.
They,
In February of 1949, a federal grand jury was impaneled in Chicago. Subpoenas were issued, um, and they demanded witnesses, documents, and well, Tucker, being ever the showman, drove the requested Tucker Corporation documents to the federal courthouse in a parade of what few Tucker 48s he had left.
yeah, I like that.
The grand jury would call over 90 witnesses and compile 10,000 pages of testimony. Through all of this, Tucker continued to make repeated media appearances where he was trying to cast blame not actually on the government. He was not really blaming the government, but instead had also fallen victim to the conspiracy side of things.
Oh
Instead,
God.
blaming the other manufacturers in Detroit.
You could have had a slam dunk here and just said the government is trying to put me in jail for being mean. But instead, you just gonna go. You're gonna go. You're say it's
Yeah.
Chevrolet's fault.
To be fair, at least he didn't blame the Jews.
That is true. That would be a very common tactic. That's the old Henry Ford tactic, as we call it.
Um, but to some degree, it seems like some in the general public didn't buy the federal government's position. We have a section here from a Time magazine article. The indictment made no attempt to set forth the complex schemes by which Tucker had raised and spent 28 million, collected from the sale of stock and dealer franchises of his torpedo. The grand jury merely totted up Tucker's statements and labeled each one false. Said the jury, said the jury, Tucker and Associates, seeking to capitalize on the unusual demand for autos, falsely represented uh, falsely represented Tucker as an automotive inventor and designing genius, and obtained money, quote, for their own personal benefit and profit by payments of excessive salaries and expense accounts for themselves, by the creation of fictitious experimental and development projects. Excuse me. So not everyone bought the government line, but that really wasn't going to save
Yeah.
him. When trial began, Tucker and six associates would plead not guilty to charges of fraud. And in some strange turns, it seemed like the few remaining investors seemed to go the way that the government wanted to. They announced a plan to divorce Tucker from his company, and reopen production. They would do this essentially by destroying the design of the Tucker 48 for a more conventional car.
A more
Uh,
boring car.
yes. Um, the trial proceedings began on October 5th of 1948. Um, with the at the same time the Tucker Corporation losing the Chicago plant the day prior in bankruptcy court. Um, and as things had advanced, at least one mistrial would be declared. They with the judge noting interference from the government prosecution. The government would make broad claims of fraud and would effectively almost continuously try to smear Tucker's name. And at the same time, as I noted, there were government agencies giving out millions of dollars to other companies. Um, this would be at the same time that the government would give out some $60 million to the Kaiser Fraser Automobile Company, which had produced cars through the war, um, but was now falling on hard times. And the defense would jump on this, saying that the Tucker Corporation had not been given this money because the Tucker Corporation was not building a conventional car. The government also didn't help themselves by providing a bunch of clueless witnesses
Oh
for
no.
their own prosecution. Um, there's in this day and age of expert witnesses, um, they would supply a bunch of morons who didn't understand the supply, like the supply chain of manufactured components for the cars, or didn't know about like the supply of suitable materials and engines that the Tucker Corporation did still possess. Um, but it seems like the prosecution was really just trying to run Tucker out of money. They would drag the prosecution into 1950, calling some 70 witnesses. Um, but this entire affair by the United States government had been so slipshod, had been just so terrible overall, that when it came time for the defense to bring forward their own witnesses, they would not call a single one.
That is a power move. Well, if there has ever been one. Just
On Saturday, January 21st of 1950, the the federal case of fraud would be handed off to the jury, and the government's and by that point the government's attempts to make this about actual securities law had just completely collapsed.
oh boy.
They were not pursuing like actual like high crimes. Um, a here a quote here, it doesn't make any difference what their intent was when they started out. They made misinterpretations of what they had. Read the pack. Oh, excuse me. This is the government. It doesn't make any difference what their intent was when they started out. They made a misinterpretation of what they had. Read the pack of lies in their ads, and remember what they had and what they didn't have in the way of an auto. Now, those were the government lawyer's words to the jury. Um, the jury would deliberate for 24 hours, and when they came back, Tucker and all co-defendants were declared innocent.
Huh. That is
The SEC the SEC had lost the trial, but for Tucker, the war was over.
yeah, he's on the
Tucker
way.
would not be getting back on his feet. The bankruptcy court had put the Tucker Corporation into receivership, and it would be taken apart it would be just taken to scraps. Um,
Yeah.
Tucker would Tucker would take his family and move back to Ypsilanti, Michigan, to try and live in a bit of peace.
Did he have? I'm
Tucker,
I'm surprised he
God,
had. I'm surprised he had any money left after this because.
well, remember, Ypsilanti Machine and Tool had not been part of this.
Oh yeah,
Had not been part of any of
I
this.
forgot about
He
all
did
that.
still have a small income.
Yeah. Okay.
Tucker would attempt to use what small savings he had to pursue the government for malicious prosecution. Um, he would go after them and several of the publications that had leaked details of the SEC report. Um, and when in fact Tucker himself had never been able to get a physical copy of the report. Um, and it would be in this that he would find out that the government, the SEC, had actually given the report to various publications while withholding it from him.
Hmm.
But the case would ultimately be thrown out when Tucker tried to have the judge removed from the case for the judge's previous statements about Preston Tucker and the corporation.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not the best move.
Yeah. That really is not. No.
He would try to he would work and would manage to reclaim some of his good name. He would go on to try to build a sports car for the South American market. Actually, uh, I don't. My Brazilian Portuguese is non-existent, but I believe it is Caracoa, um, Carioca, which
Looking it
he
up,
would try to build. I don't know how much of it actually came out. I didn't have time to look it up.
I'm looking at it right
Um,
now. It kind of reminds me of the what is it called? That really fucked up Chrysler uh Roadster, whatever it was, from like the early 2000s.
oh yeah,
Reminds me of that a lot. I actually sort of
it,
like
it
it a little bit.
in my listeners, if we ever do more automotive episodes, you'll hear me say it again. It kind of looks like a fish.
It does indeed look like a fish. It actually really does.
Um, the this this project with the Brazilians would force him into repeated travel, which had left him exceedingly fatigued. Um, and a doctor would diagnose Preston Tucker with lung cancer. This is almost certainly due to the fact that Preston Tucker had been a lifelong smoker. Um,
That'll do it.
it's a quote I left out from like his time in Louisiana, but members who worked at the gunboat plant in Louisiana noted that he was almost always smoking and could on a second go from not smoking to smoking.
That'll do it.
So
Yep.
he was not in good health. And Preston Tucker would die December 26th, 1956, at the age of 53. Um, Ironically, Otto Kerner, the federal prosecutor who had led the case against Preston Tucker, would in 1974 be found guilty of stock fraud by the federal government.
God. What a. I don't have anything to say about that. That's just poetry.
That's yeah, that's just fate for you.
God.
Do I think that there was a wide-ranging industrial conspiracy to bring down Preston Tucker? No. I a conspiracy involving the major car manufacturers, the United States government, and the United States, publishing houses would have generated a lot of noise, especially in the 1940s. especially a paper trail.
Also, why would they
It
do it?
takes,
Why would the car
yeah,
manufacturers do that? Why would they have been that terrified by the Tucker torpedo and said we gotta stop it?
especially the companies that have for the past 5, 6 years been making millions from the government building tanks and bombers for
Yeah.
the single largest war that's ever happened.
The single largest thing, basically, that's ever happened.
Yeah. Um, and especially the fact that like it would have taken one, one switchboard operator, one postal clerk who says, oh, I've seen letters going from, the SEC to the head of Chrysler, or from, say, hey, I connected a call between, like the New York Times and the head of Ford. It's it doesn't make sense. It
Yeah.
doesn't make sense that there would be a massive conspiracy.
Yeah, not really.
Do I think that for a variety of reasons, a few individuals strongly disliked Preston Tucker and would act with all of their power to stop him? Yes. I do believe that the heads of the SEC and of a few other, of the people who could actively prosecute Tucker did work to stop him.
They didn't like the
I
vibe.
think that they made a concerted effort to deploy the weight of their agencies against him, and specifically him.
Just because they didn't like the vibe he gave off, basically.
Yes. Do I believe that Preston Tucker also made a ton of mistakes and ended up causing more trouble for himself? Certainly. I am a strong proponent that most CEOs should just shut the hell up and stop talking.
Yes, I do agree with that.
Because the more they open their mouths, they, the more they cause trouble.
Yeah.
Do I think that if given the proper resources, the Tucker automobile brand would still be around? Who knows?
Probably
It's
not.
possible.
Probably not, though.
Yeah, it's highly unlikely, but they could have tried.
Yeah.
And with that, I am going to swiftly swing this podcast into the infield green of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway because we've been going for so freaking long.
John.
Please tell me that we have a shorter story next time.
We'll see. I'll just say that. We are going to be
Okay.
talking about two things. We are going back to New York,
Yay!
and we are talking about football again. We're not talking about
Oh no!
we're not talking about a league, though. We're talking about a team. A team that I've probably kind of already spoiled it by saying that it's in New York. A team that really just needs to cut it out. All right, so
And with that, I've been Andrea. I'm glad that
John.
survived,
barely.
and this has been Stop Doing That. Good night!